Hi everyone, welcome to the Bio Edge.
Most vertebrates that have eyes also have eye whites, where the eye white is defined as the sclera of the eyeball, um, and the sclera is normally non-pigmented. In other words, it lacks the melanin pigment that darkens the skin of animals. And so when you see the sclera of the eyeball, you normally see it as a white surface. Now, in most animals, in most vertebrates, the white sclera of the eyeball is not particularly visible because the eyelids are fairly tight, and there's no function in most animals for a display of the eye whites. Now, with that background in mind, humans are extremely unusual in this respect because we humans have an eyelid design whereby we continually expose a large surface of the white sclera, and this makes our eyeball movements conspicuous to each other because when we interact socially, we not only speak with each other, but we also move our eyes in such a way that the eye whites are flickering relative to the skin of the face and relative to the iris of the eye. And so we can actually read eye movements in other humans in a way that helps communicate the full subtlety of intention and attention in social interactions. Now, most of us take this completely for granted and never really think about it because it's so much part of our lives, but we do have this eye language as well as our verbal language. And in the context of mammals in particular, our eye language is extremely complex and is a kind of semaphore language, a sign language in parallel with the spoken and heard language. Now, all of that's very well, but the remarkable thing is that our closest primate relatives, the great apes, and indeed monkeys in general, have a completely different pattern in the case of most species. Certainly in the case of gorillas and chimps, which are our closest genetic relatives, the eyes function quite differently from in humans, surprisingly differently for such close relatives, because in these apes, the sclera of the eyeball is actually pigmented. It's black in the same sense as the skin is black, and so great apes not only display very little of the scleral surface of the eyeball, but that such part as they do display tends to be obscured by actual pigmentation. So if you can imagine looking at another human being, and instead of seeing the whites of their eyes, you see a surface that is as black as the skin of a dark-skinned person, that's a very weird thought, but that is exactly the way that great apes and most monkeys live. They have these darkened out, blacked out eyes, and so their morphology is such that they can't really communicate eye movements in the ways that we humans do. Now, this was discovered about 10 years ago, and the finding has been published by Japanese researchers. But what has been overlooked is that orangutans are a partial exception to this pattern, only a partial exception. And the fact that orangutans are somewhat human-like in a partial display of the eye whites is one indication that orangutans are perhaps the real closest relatives of humans among the primates. There's some controversy as to which of the great apes are closest to the ancestor of humans, and generally the consensus is that it's chimps, but there is an argument in favor of orangutans, and the use by orangutans of eye white displays is consistent with that view that orangutans are in some ways closer to us than chimps are. Now, what happens in orangutans is that, like all mammals, the animals are born with white, unpigmented scleras, and then, as in other great apes, the sclera becomes pigmented as the animal grows through the juvenile stage. But whereas in chimps and gorillas, the eye whites remain blackened out through maturity. What happens in orangutans is that the adult males, upon reaching adulthood, appear to actually lose their pigmentation by a kind of a reversion in the pigmentation of the sclera, um, whereby they readopt the human pattern, which is to have um, the eye whites showing. And although orangutans have a social taboo, as it were, against looking at each other directly in the way that we humans find so normal, nonetheless, if you observe young adult male orangutans interacting, you'll notice that in many photographs and video clips, you can actually see the eye whites of young male orangutans flickering as they glance sideways at each other. And that appears to be a rudimentary emulation, as it were, of the complexity of eye white communication that we see in humans. This does not seem to operate much in females. Females seem to have rather brown scleras in orangutans, and they seem to have a relatively uncomplicated way of casting their gaze socially. And then in fully mature male orangutans, the face becomes so grossly distorted by great big folds of flesh that the eyes become quite small in the vastness of the face, and the eyes tend to be shaded by these fleshy folds. And so we don't see much evidence that in fully mature orangutans there's much going on in terms of eye white communication. It just seems to be this young adult male stage in which there's some emulation of the human pattern of using eye whites to communicate. And we mention this here at the BioEdge because although the great apes have been studied intensely, it seems that this particular nuance of eye white displays in orangutans has been previously overlooked. And with that thought, we look forward to seeing you next time for our next BioBullet here at the BioEdge, and it's bye for now.